I shouldn't have been there. That's what everyone kept telling me afterward. But when you're 24, exhausted from pulling double shifts, and your car breaks down in the rain 3 blocks from your apartment, you don't think about which alley might be a shortcut and which might be something else entirely. The rain pelted down mercilessly, soaking through my thin waitress uniform. The black polyester clung to my skin, and my shoes, cheap knockoffs I'd bought on sale, were already ruined, squishing with every step. Lightning flashed, illuminating the narrow passage between 2 buildings that would cut 5 minutes off my walk home. 5 minutes. That's all I was trying to save. The alley was surprisingly clean for downtown Chicago, with neat stacks of crates along one wall and a row of black luxury cars parked in what seemed to be reserved spaces. I hurried past, head down against the rain, clutching my purse, which contained exactly $27 in tips, a tube of almost empty lipstick, and a photo of my mother that I'd carried since her funeral 3 years ago. I was halfway through when I heard it. The sound of glass shattering followed by a muffled thud. I froze, my heartbeat drowning out even the rain for a moment. I should have run, should have pretended I hadn't heard, should have kept walking, eyes forward, mind blank. Instead, I looked. There was a door, heavy steel, painted black to match the brick wall, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. It stood slightly ajar now, a sliver of golden light spilling onto the wet pavement. 2 men emerged, dragging something between them, something that left a dark smear on the ground that the rain couldn't quite wash away. I gasped. A tiny sound, barely audible to my own ears over the storm. But they heard. The taller one turned, his face shadowed beneath the brim of an expensive hat. "Boss?" he said, just that one word, his voice deep and calm as if he'd merely commented on the weather. And then I saw him. He appeared in the doorway like a specter materializing from the shadows. Tall, taller than his men, with broad shoulders perfectly outlined by a suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The light from inside caught on his cufflinks first, small flashes of silver against the darkness, before illuminating a face that seemed carved from marble, all sharp angles and cold perfection. But it was his eyes that held me, dark and penetrating. They seemed to see right through my rain-soaked clothes to the terror beneath my skin. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us moved. Thunder rolled overhead, but the sound seemed distant compared to the roaring in my ears. He stepped forward, his Italian leather shoes somehow repelling the rain and filth of the alley. With each step he took toward me, I felt my chances of escape diminishing. His security detail, because that's what they were, I realized now, fanned out slightly, cutting off any hope of running. "You should have never walked in here," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, with an accent I couldn't quite place. There was something almost musical about it, the way the words flowed like dark honey. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I took a step backward, my ruined shoe slipping on the wet pavement. I would have fallen if one of his men hadn't suddenly appeared behind me, his hand steady against my back, not pushing, not grabbing, just there, ensuring I stayed exactly where I was. And then the man, the boss, smiled. It transformed his face in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying, like watching a predator bare its teeth right before the kill. But I'm glad. Those 3 words sent ice through my veins despite the strange warmth in his voice. I clutched my purse tighter, as if that pathetic bag could shield me from whatever was coming. "I'm sorry," I managed to whisper, my voice cracking. "I didn't see anything. I was just taking a shortcut home. My car broke down and..." He raised a hand, and I fell silent instantly. That simple gesture carried more authority than a shout. "What's your name?" he asked. I hesitated, wondering if giving a false name might save me. But something in those dark eyes told me he would know if I lied. "Eleanor," I said. "Eleanor Wright." "Eleanor," he repeated, as if testing how my name felt on his tongue. "You're soaked." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway, droplets of water cascading from my hair with the movement. He turned to the man closest to him, shorter, stockier, with a scar that ran from his eyebrow to his jaw. "Bring the car around, Marco." Then to me, "I insist on driving you home." The way he said insist made it clear this wasn't an offer I could decline. "That's really not necessary," I said, my voice sounding thin and unconvincing even to my own ears. I only live a few blocks from here. All the more reason. He stepped closer, and I caught his scent. Expensive cologne with notes of cedar and something darker underneath. It would be unconscionable to let you walk home in this weather. A black Bentley glided into the alley, moving silently despite its size. The driver, Marco, stepped out and opened the rear door. The boss gestured toward it with one elegant hand. After you, Eleanor. I looked at the open car door, then back down the alley toward the safety of the main street. The man behind me shifted slightly, a reminder of his presence. I had no choice, and we all knew it. I climbed into the Bentley, the leather seat cool and dry against my wet skin. He slid in beside me, leaving enough space that we weren't touching, yet somehow filling the entire car with his presence. The door closed with a soft thud that sounded to me like a prison cell locking. "Where do you live?" he asked as Marco returned to the driver's seat. I gave my address in a whisper, and the car moved forward, the wipers clearing sheets of rain from the windshield. Inside, it was warm and eerily quiet, the expensive engineering muffling the storm to a distant murmur. "You haven't asked who I am," he said after a moment, his gaze fixed on my face. "I don't need to know," I said quickly. Too quickly. That smile again, the one that didn't reach his eyes, but I think you do. My name is Alessio Russo. The name meant nothing to me then. I didn't move in circles where names like his carried weight and inspired fear. I was just a waitress trying to save enough for night classes, living in a studio apartment with a leaky ceiling and dreams that were getting smaller every day. "I own several businesses in this city," he continued, "including the establishment you happened to pass tonight." "I'm sorry," I said again. "I really didn't see anything." "But you did." His voice remained soft, conversational. "You saw my men removing something from my property. You saw my face. You know my name now." Each statement fell between us like stones dropping into dark water. I gripped the edge of the seat, my knuckles turning white. "I won't tell anyone," I promised. "Please, I just want to go home." "And I'm taking you there," he gestured to the passing streets outside. "See? No detours." I realized then that we were indeed heading directly to my apartment building. Somehow that was more frightening than if he'd taken me elsewhere. "How will you pay for car repairs on a waitress's salary?" he asked suddenly. I blinked, thrown by the change of subject. "How did you know I'm a waitress?" He nodded toward my uniform, still visible beneath my rain-soaked jacket. "The Venetian, one of Giovanni Marconi's restaurants." His lip curled slightly. "Mediocre food, excellent location. The pay is decent," I said, defensive despite my fear. "And the tips are good on weekends, but not good enough to fix whatever is wrong with your car." I didn't answer. He was right. The transmission had been slipping for weeks, and the estimate I'd gotten was more than I could afford. I'd been putting money aside, but at the rate I was saving, it would be months before I could get it fixed. "I have a proposition for you, Eleanor Wright." He turned in his seat to face me fully, and I pressed myself against the door, as if those extra inches could somehow protect me. "I find myself in need of someone with your particular qualities." "What qualities?" I asked, my mouth dry. "You're observant, quick thinking. And despite your fear, which is entirely rational, I assure you, you've maintained your composure." His eyes moved over my face, assessing. "Those are valuable traits." The car slowed, pulling up in front of my building. I recognized the cracked concrete steps, the flickering security light that the landlord never fixed. Home had never looked so inviting, or so impossibly far away. "I need an assistant," he said. "Someone who can handle various administrative tasks with discretion and efficiency." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "You want to hire me?" "Yes." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card. Thick, cream-colored paper with just his name and a phone number embossed in dark ink. "The position pays $15,000 a month plus benefits." My ears rang. $15,000 was more than I made in half a year at the restaurant. That's impossible," I stammered. "Why would you offer me that kind of money?" "Because that's what the position is worth to me." He held the card out between two fingers. "And because we both know this isn't really a choice, Eleanor." There it was, the threat beneath the offer, shimmering like heat on asphalt. I took the card, my fingers trembling. "Think about it overnight," he said, though his tone made it clear what answer he expected. "Call the number tomorrow before noon with your decision." Marco opened my door from outside, holding an umbrella over the opening. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the gesture wasn't really about keeping me dry. "One more thing," Alessio said as I moved to exit the car. "If you decide to decline my generous offer, or if you fail to call at all," he paused, his expression softening into something almost regretful. "Well, Chicago is such a dangerous city, people disappear all the time." I stepped out onto the sidewalk, my legs unsteady beneath me. Marco closed the door and returned to the driver's seat without a word. The window lowered, and Alessio looked out at me, his face half in shadow. "Sleep well, Eleanor Wright. I look forward to our partnership." The Bentley pulled away, leaving me clutching his business card in one hand and what remained of my old life in the other. I knew, standing there on that cracked sidewalk, that whatever I decided, nothing would ever be the same again. I trudged up the stairs to my apartment, unlocked the 3 deadbolts I'd installed after a break-in last year, and collapsed against the door once it closed behind me. My uniform dripped onto the linoleum floor, forming a puddle that reflected the single bulb hanging from my ceiling. On my kitchen counter, next to a stack of past-due notices, my phone blinked with messages. 2 from my manager at the restaurant, probably wondering why I hadn't shown up for my second shift. 1 from Jenny, the only friend who'd stuck around after I'd dropped out of college to care for my mother. I ignored them all and walked to the bathroom, stripping off my wet clothes and stepping into a shower that never quite got hot enough. As the lukewarm water washed over me, I tried to make sense of what had happened. I'd witnessed something I shouldn't have. That much was clear. And now Alessio Russo, whoever he really was, had made me an offer that was equal parts lifeline and noose, $15,000 a month. The number echoed in my head as I dried off and pulled on an oversized t-shirt to sleep in. With that kind of money, I could pay off my mother's medical debts, fix my car, maybe even go back to school. All I had to do was tie my fate to a man who'd threatened to make me disappear if I refused. I curled up on my sagging mattress, Alessio's business card on the nightstand beside me. The last thing I saw before exhaustion claimed me was that cream-colored rectangle, glowing faintly in the dim light from the street outside, a passport to salvation or damnation. I didn't yet know which, but I knew which one I'd choose in the morning. Morning came with harsh sunlight streaming through my thin curtains and the distant sound of sirens, Chicago's constant lullaby. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the familiar water stains with my eyes, as reality settled over me like a shroud. Last night hadn't been a nightmare. The business card still sat on my nightstand, innocent-looking in the daylight. I reached for my phone. It was 10:37 a.m., less than 90 minutes to make a decision that wasn't really a decision at all. I forced myself out of bed and into the kitchen, where I mechanically went through the motions of making coffee. The machine sputtered and hissed, producing a liquid that was more bitter than caffeinated, but it was all I had. As I sipped from my chipped mug, I stared at the card I'd brought with me from the bedroom. Alessio Russo. The name still meant nothing to me, but the power he wielded had been unmistakable. I grabbed my laptop, an ancient thing that wheezed like an asthmatic whenever I asked it to do more than check email, and typed his name into the search bar. The results were surprisingly sparse. A few mentions in business journals about property acquisitions through something called the Russo Group. A photo from a charity gala 3 years ago, where he stood in the background, partially obscured but unmistakable. Nothing that screamed dangerous criminal, but nothing that convinced me he was simply a businessman either. My phone chimed with another message from my manager. "Eleanor, if you don't show up today, don't bother coming back at all." I closed the message without responding. It wouldn't matter soon anyway. At 11:45, I picked up the card and dialed the number with shaking fingers. It rang only once before being answered. "Ms. Wright." It wasn't a question. The voice belonged to a woman, her tone professional and crisp. "Mr. Russo is expecting your call. Please hold." There was no music, just silence so complete I wondered if the call had dropped. Then his voice filled my ear, that same musical cadence that had haunted my dreams. "Eleanor, I'm pleased you called." Again, not a question. He'd known I would call. known I had no real choice. "I've thought about your offer," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "And? I accept." I could almost hear his smile through the phone. "Excellent. A car will pick you up in 30 minutes. Pack whatever you need for today. We'll arrange for the rest of your belongings to be moved tomorrow." "Moved?" I echoed. "I don't understand." "Part of your compensation package includes housing, Eleanor. It's more convenient for everyone." The implications of that statement sent a chill down my spine. He wanted me where he could watch me, but my apartment will be taken care of. Your lease will be paid out. Now 30 minutes. Be ready. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, then around at my tiny apartment. I'd lived here for 4 years. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The idea of leaving it, of having no space that wasn't somehow controlled by Alessio Russo, made me feel like I was being slowly buried alive. Still, I moved on autopilot, pulling clothes from my closet and tucking them into a worn duffel bag. What did one wear to work for a man like him? I settled on the most professional outfit I owned: black slacks that were slightly too big, a white blouse with only one small coffee stain on the sleeve, and a navy blazer I'd bought secondhand for job interviews. At precisely 12:15, my phone buzzed with a text message. Downstairs. I took one last look around my apartment, grabbed my bag, and locked the door behind me. The same black Bentley from last night was parked at the curb, Marco standing beside it with his expressionless face. He opened the rear door without a word. I'd half expected Alessio to be inside, but the car was empty. Marco closed the door after me, then slid into the driver's seat. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled away from the curb. "The tower," he replied, offering nothing more. We drove in silence through the city, eventually pulling up to one of Chicago's sleeker skyscrapers, all glass and steel, reflecting the midday sun like a massive mirror. Marco led me through a private entrance, past security guards who nodded to him with deference, and into an elevator that required a keycard to operate. He pressed the button for the 50th floor, the top of the building. The elevator rose smoothly, my stomach dropping slightly with the rapid ascent. When the doors opened, I stepped into what could only be described as a fortress disguised as a luxury office. The reception area was all understated elegance: cream marble floors, tasteful artwork on the walls, and a massive desk where a woman who looked like she moonlighted as a runway model sat typing on a sleek computer. She looked up as we approached, her expression professionally blank. "Ms. Wright," she said, rising to her feet. She was tall, willowy, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "I'm Sophia, Mr. Russo's executive assistant. Welcome to the Russo Group." I clutched my bag tighter. "Thank you." "Marco, you can go," she said, dismissing him with a slight nod. He disappeared back into the elevator without a word. Sophia turned her attention back to me. "Mr. Russo is in a meeting, but he asked me to get you settled. I'll show you to your office. My office." The words sounded foreign, like they belonged to someone else's life. I followed her down a hallway lined with glass-walled conference rooms and private offices. Men and women in expensive suits moved with purpose, barely glancing our way. It looked like any high-end corporate office. Nothing to suggest that its owner had men who dragged things that left bloodstains through back alleys. Sophia stopped at a door near the end of the hall, opening it to reveal a space that made me catch my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, Lake Michigan, a brilliant blue in the distance. The furniture was minimal but clearly expensive. A glass desk, an ergonomic chair that probably cost as much as my car, and a small seating area with a leather sofa and 2 chairs. "This is yours," Sophia said, watching my reaction with what might have been amusement. "Your computer has been set up with the accounts you'll need access to. Your key card is in the top drawer. It will get you into the building, this floor, and your apartment." "My apartment?" She nodded toward the windows. "The residential section of the tower is on floors 40 through 49. You're on 45. I'll take you there after you meet with Mr. Russo." I set my bag down beside the desk, feeling increasingly like I'd stepped through the looking glass. "What exactly will I be doing? Mr. Russo will explain your duties himself. For now, familiarize yourself with the computer system. I'll come get you when he's ready." She turned to leave, then paused. "One piece of advice, Eleanor?" The use of my first name surprised me. Yes? Whatever you saw in that alley, forget it. And whatever you think you know about Mr. Russo, forget that too. It's easier that way." With that enigmatic statement, she left, closing the door quietly behind her. I sank into the chair, which adjusted to my body like a gentle embrace. The computer on the desk came to life as I touched the mouse, asking for a password I didn't have. I opened the top drawer and found a key card with my name on it, along with a folded piece of paper. Inside was written a single word: Eleanor, followed by what I assumed was my temporary password. I logged in, finding a sleek, minimalist desktop with only a few icons. Email, calendar, a folder labeled Projects, and another simply called RG. I clicked on the email, finding an inbox that was empty except for a welcome message from IT with instructions for changing my password. Curious, I tried the folder labeled RG. A password prompt appeared, and when I tried Eleanor1 again, an error message flashed. Access denied. Unauthorized attempt logged. My pulse quickened. I quickly closed the window, suddenly certain I was being watched. I glanced around, spotting the small camera in the corner of the ceiling. Of course there would be surveillance. I was in the lion's den now. I spent the next hour exploring what I could access, which wasn't much. My calendar showed nothing but orientation for the rest of the day. The projects folder contained templates for various documents, contracts, proposals, non-disclosure agreements, but no actual files. A knock at the door made me jump. Sophia stood in the doorway, somehow looking even more polished than she had an hour ago. "Mr. Russo will see you now." I smoothed my blazer and followed her down the hall to a set of double doors at the end. She knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. Alessio Russo's office made mine look like a storage closet. It occupied the corner of the building, with 2 walls of windows offering views in different directions. A massive desk dominated one end of the room, while a seating area with leather couches and a wet bar took up the other. The man himself stood with his back to us, looking out over the city like he owned it. Maybe he did. "Sir," Sophia said, "Ms. Wright is here." He turned, and I was struck again by how his presence seemed to fill the room. In daylight, his features were even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw shadowed by carefully maintained stubble, and those eyes, dark and penetrating. He'd changed from last night's suit to another that looked nearly identical to my untrained eye, though I was certain it cost more than a year's rent on my apartment. "Thank you, Sophia," he said, never taking his eyes off me. "That will be all for now." She nodded and left, closing the doors behind her. Alessio gestured to one of the chairs in front of his desk. "Please, sit." I perched on the edge of the chair, my back straight, hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. He sat across from me, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Did you sleep well?" he asked finally. The question was so mundane, so normal, that it caught me off guard. "Not really," I admitted. "Honesty," he said, his lips curving into that same smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's good. I value honesty above most things, Eleanor." "What exactly will I be doing here, Mr. Russo?" I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Alessio, please." He leaned back in his chair. "And to answer your question, you'll be my personal assistant." "I thought Sophia was your assistant." "Sophia handles the business. You'll handle me." There was an undercurrent to his words that made heat rise to my cheeks. He continued before I could respond. "My schedule, my personal correspondence, my private matters, things that require the utmost discretion." "Why me? I'm not qualified for this. Qualifications can be learned. Loyalty and discretion are more innate qualities." He leaned forward slightly. "And you, Eleanor Wright, have something else I find valuable." "What's that?" "You have nothing to lose," he said simply. "No family since your mother passed. Few friends. No romantic entanglements. A dead-end job you've already lost. In short, you're unencumbered." The clinical assessment of my lonely existence stung more than I wanted to admit. "You investigated me. Of course I did." He sounded almost amused at the suggestion that he wouldn't have. "Just as you tried to investigate me this morning." I stiffened. "How did you—" "Your laptop is quite outdated. You should use the one we've provided." He stood, moving to the bar cart in the corner. Drink? No, thank you, I said, watching as he poured amber liquid into a crystal glass for himself. He returned to his desk, taking a small sip before setting the glass down. Let me be direct, Eleanor. What you witnessed last night was unfortunate, but it presents an opportunity for both of us. An opportunity, I repeated flatly. Yes, you need financial stability. I need someone I can trust. His eyes never left mine, and trust in my world is often born from mutual vulnerability. I'm not sure how I'm making you vulnerable. His smile widened a fraction. You're not. Yet. But you will be. He opened a drawer and withdrew a leather portfolio, sliding it across the desk toward me. Your contract. The terms are quite generous, as I mentioned. In addition to your salary, you'll have the apartment, health insurance, and a car at your disposal. I hesitated before taking the portfolio. Inside was a document printed on thick paper, at least 20 pages long. I skimmed the first page, noting the salary, $15,000 a month, just as he'd promised, and a list of benefits that made my head spin. Turn to page 12, he instructed. I did, finding a section titled Confidentiality and Loyalty. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. Everything I would see or hear while working for Alessio Russo was to remain absolutely confidential, under penalty of legal action and additional remedies as deemed necessary. Additional remedies, I said, looking up. You mean making me disappear? He didn't deny it. I prefer to think of it as incentivizing discretion. This is insane, I whispered, more to myself than to him. No, Eleanor, this is business. He reached for his glass again. My business happens to involve activities that sometimes require extreme privacy. Illegal activities, I clarified. In some cases, yes. His candor was jarring, but the Russo Group itself is legitimate. Real estate, import, export, hospitality, all perfectly legal enterprises that generate substantial revenue and launder money from the illegal ones, I said before I could stop myself. Instead of anger, his expression showed something like approval. You're quick. That will serve you well. He tapped the contract. You'll find a pen in the portfolio. I stared at the document, reality crashing down on me again. What if I say no? We both know you won't. His voice remained gentle, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. But if you're asking what would happen in that hypothetical scenario, let's just say you've already seen too much. And now you know even more. The threat hung in the air between us, all the more effective for its softness. I took the pen from the portfolio. Where do I sign? He flipped to the last page, pointing to a line at the bottom. I signed my name, the ink flowing smoothly from the expensive pen. It felt like signing away more than my employment. It felt like signing away my freedom. Alessio took the contract, signed his own name with a flourish, and pressed a button on his desk. Sophia appeared within seconds, as if she'd been waiting just outside. File this, please, he said, handing her the contract. And show Eleanor to her apartment after lunch. She'll start officially tomorrow. Yes, sir. Sophia took the portfolio and disappeared again. Now, Alessio said, standing. Let's eat. You must be hungry. As if on cue, my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch shift at the restaurant, too anxious to think about food until he mentioned it. He led me through a door I hadn't noticed, hidden in the wood paneling of his office. It opened onto a private dining room with another stunning view of the city. A table was already set for two, silver domes covering what I assumed were our plates. I took the liberty of ordering, he said, pulling out a chair for me. I hope you don't mind. I sat, feeling increasingly like a character in someone else's story. He took the seat across from me and lifted the domes, revealing perfectly arranged plates of pasta with seafood. Linguine alle vongole, he said, an old family recipe. The food smelled divine, but I hesitated, an irrational fear flashing through my mind. What if it was drugged? What if this was all some elaborate setup? Alessio watched me, then smiled. A real one this time, with a hint of amusement that actually reached his eyes. It's not poisoned, Eleanor. If I wanted to harm you, there are far more efficient ways. He twirled pasta around his fork and took a bite, maintaining eye contact. See? Perfectly safe. I felt foolish, but took a small bite anyway. The flavors exploded on my tongue. Garlic, white wine, the brine of the clams, all perfectly balanced. It's delicious, I admitted. My mother taught me to cook when I was a boy, he said, his accent becoming more pronounced as he spoke of family. She believed that no matter what business a man was in, he should know how to feed himself properly. The mention of his mother humanized him in a way that made me uncomfortable. It was easier to think of him as a monster than as someone with a history, a family, a mother who taught him to cook. Where is she now? I asked, taking another bite. She died when I was 16. A shadow crossed his face. Cancer. Much like your mother, I believe. The pasta turned to ash in my mouth. How do you know that? As I said, I had you investigated. He refilled my water glass from a crystal pitcher. We have that in common. Losing our mothers too young, it shapes a person. I didn't want to have anything in common with him. I didn't want this strange, forced intimacy. Is that why you chose me? I asked. Because of my mother? No. He set down his fork. I chose you because you saw something you shouldn't have, and because you handled it with remarkable composure. The similarities in our backgrounds are merely interesting. We ate in silence for a few moments, the only sounds the delicate clink of silverware against fine china and the distant hum of the city below. What did I see? I finally asked. In the alley. His expression closed off immediately. Nothing that concerns you. If I'm going to be your personal assistant, handling your private matters, shouldn't I know what I'm getting into? You'll know what you need to know when you need to know it. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. For now, focus on learning your duties. Sophia will brief you on the basics this afternoon. The rest of lunch passed in uncomfortable silence. When we finished, Alessio escorted me back to his office and called for Sophia, who appeared so promptly I again wondered if she waited just outside his door all day. Show Eleanor to her apartment and make sure she has everything she needs, he instructed. I have calls until 6, then dinner with the Kavanaughs at 8. Yes, sir, Sophia replied, then turned to me. This way, please. I followed her back to the elevator, where she used her keycard to access the residential floors. We descended to the 45th floor in silence. Mr. Russo doesn't usually take such a personal interest in new employees, she said as the doors opened. Especially not assistants. The hallway was plushly carpeted, with only 4 doors visible. Clearly these were large apartments. She led me to the one marked 4502 and swiped her own card before handing me mine. You'll need to set up your fingerprint for access, she explained. More secure than just the card. The apartment that awaited me beyond the door made my knees weak. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows similar to those in the office, illuminating a space that was easily 4 times the size of my old apartment. Modern furniture in neutral tones, hardwood floors with plush area rugs, a kitchen with marble countertops and appliances that looked like they belonged in a magazine. This is... I trailed off, unable to find words. Standard executive housing, Sophia supplied, watching me with that same hint of amusement from earlier. The bedroom and bathroom are through there. Your things will be delivered tomorrow, but the closet has already been stocked with basics in your size. I turned to her, confused. Stocked? How? She shrugged elegantly. Mr. Russo has people for that sort of thing. The idea of strangers selecting clothes for me, knowing my sizes, was deeply unsettling. I walked to the bedroom in a daze, finding a space dominated by a king-sized bed with what looked like Egyptian cotton sheets. The bathroom beyond was all white marble and glass, with a shower big enough for 4 people and a soaking tub by the window. This is insane, I whispered, echoing my words from earlier. You'll get used to it, Sophia said from the doorway. Everyone does. I turned to face her. How long have you worked for him? 6 years. And did he recruit you the same way? Something flashed in her eyes, caution perhaps. No, my situation was different. She checked her watch. I need to get back upstairs. Your keycard works for the elevator, this apartment, and your office. Nowhere else for now. The fridge is stocked, and there's a tablet on the counter with building information. Any questions? I had about 1,000, but none she was likely to answer. No, thank you. Mr. Russo expects you in the office at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late." With that, she turned and left, the door locking automatically behind her. I wandered back to the living room in a daze, running my fingers over the expensive furniture. This morning, I'd been a waitress about to lose my job, living in a cramped apartment I could barely afford. Now I was, what? An employee? A prisoner in a gilded cage? Both? I moved to the windows, looking out over the city. From this height, Chicago looked almost peaceful, the chaos and grime invisible beneath the geometric perfection of the skyline. People moved like ants along the streets below, each with their own life, their own problems. None of them knew I was up here, watching. None of them knew what had happened to me. The tablet Sophia had mentioned sat on the kitchen counter. I picked it up, finding it already unlocked. The home screen showed apps for building services, food delivery, security, and something called RG Communications. I tapped on the security app, discovering that I could view cameras in the hallway outside my apartment and request security personnel if needed. I couldn't quite decide if the security features were meant to protect me or monitor me. Perhaps both. The food delivery app showed dozens of high-end restaurants that would deliver directly to the building, all apparently included as part of my compensation package. My stomach was still full from lunch, but I bookmarked the page for later. The RG Communications app required a password. I tried Eleanor again, surprised when it worked. Inside was a messaging system, with only 2 contacts available: Alessio Russo and Sophia Ricci. A notification already waited. A message from Sophia. "Orientation materials on your office computer. Review before tomorrow." I set the tablet down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had been keeping me going since last night was fading, leaving me hollow and drained. I made my way back to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, running my hand over the silky bedspread. What had I gotten myself into? More importantly, was there any way out? I thought of the contract I'd signed, with its ominous additional remedies. I thought of whatever it was that Marco and the other man had been dragging through that alley, something that left a dark smear on the wet pavement. I thought of Alessio's eyes, cold and calculating even when his smile seemed warm. No, there was no way out. Not yet, anyway. I kicked off my shoes and lay back on the bed, intending to rest for just a moment before exploring the apartment further. Instead, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The sleep of the condemned who knows that tomorrow will bring challenges they can't begin to imagine. The shrill beeping of an unfamiliar alarm jolted me awake. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't remember where I was. The bed was too soft, the room too spacious, the light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows too bright. Then it all came rushing back. The alley. Alessio Russo. The contract I'd signed. I sat up, realizing I was still in yesterday's clothes, now hopelessly wrinkled. The digital clock on the nightstand read 6:30 a.m. I had an hour and a half to prepare for my first official day as the personal assistant to a man who had essentially blackmailed me into working for him. I dragged myself to the bathroom, gasping again at its luxury. The shower had multiple jets and a digital control panel that took me several minutes to figure out. When I finally got the water running, it was perfectly hot, with pressure that made my old apartment's shower feel like a leaky faucet in comparison. After showering, I wrapped myself in a plush towel and ventured to the walk-in closet Sophia had mentioned. What I found inside made me freeze. Rows of clothing, dresses, blouses, slacks, skirts, all with designer labels I recognized but had never been able to afford. Shoes lined one wall, handbags another. Everything looked to be exactly my size. I ran my fingers over a silk blouse, the price tag still attached. $800. For one shirt. My entire wardrobe from my old apartment wouldn't add up to the cost of 3 items in this closet. With trembling hands, I selected the most conservative outfit I could find. A charcoal pencil skirt, a cream blouse with a high neck, and a fitted black blazer. The clothes fit perfectly, which was both convenient and deeply unsettling. How had they known? Who had been watching me closely enough to know not just my size but my proportions so precisely? At 7:45, I made my way to the elevator, my keycard granting me access to the 50th floor. The office was already humming with activity when I arrived. Sophia sat at her desk, typing rapidly, her posture perfect. She looked up as I approached. Good morning, she said, her eyes scanning my outfit with approval. Mr. Russo is already here. He wants to see you right away. My stomach tightened. Is something wrong? Not that I'm aware of. His coffee is on your desk. Bring it with you. She returned to her typing, dismissing me. I found a steaming cup of coffee on my desk, black and fragrant. Carrying it carefully, I made my way to Alessio's office. The double doors were closed. I hesitated, then knocked softly. Come in. His voice called from within. He was standing at the window again, his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear. He wore another impeccable suit, this one a deep navy that made his shoulders look even broader. He held up one finger without turning, signaling me to wait. I don't care what it costs, he was saying, his voice cool, but with an undercurrent of steel. Take care of it. Now. He ended the call and turned to face me. Eleanor, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Russo, I said, extending the coffee cup. Sophia said you wanted to see me. He took the cup, his fingers brushing against mine. The brief contact sent an unwelcome spark up my arm. Thank you. And please, I told you yesterday, call me Alessio. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Up close, he was even more intimidating, his presence filling the room. He smelled expensive, like sandalwood and something darker underneath. You look nice, he said, gesturing to my outfit. Everything fit properly? Yes, thank you, I replied stiffly, though it was unnecessary to provide so much. It was completely necessary. He moved to his desk, motioning for me to sit in the chair across from him. Your appearance reflects on me now. And in my world, appearances matter greatly. I sat, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from fidgeting. I reviewed the orientation materials Sophia sent. Good. He took a sip of coffee. Then you understand the basics of what we do here. Or at least, what the legitimate side of the business does. Real estate, hospitality, import-export, I recited. Precisely. Today, I'd like you to shadow me. See how I work, who I interact with, what I expect. He leaned forward slightly. Think of it as immersion learning. I understand. Do you? His eyes locked with mine. This isn't just a job, Eleanor. From the moment you signed that contract, you became part of my inner circle. That comes with privileges and protections, but also with risks and expectations. Do you truly understand what that means? I understand that I don't have a choice, I said, surprising myself with my directness. He sat back, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. There's always a choice. You made yours in that alley when you looked instead of walking away. You made it again when you got into my car. And you made it a third time when you signed the contract. He paused. But you're right. The choices now are more constrained. Stay loyal to me, and you'll want for nothing. Betray me. He didn't need to finish the sentence. I won't betray you, I said quietly. No, he agreed, you won't. The certainty in his voice sent a chill down my spine. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood. Our first meeting is in 5 minutes. Conference room B. You'll take notes. He moved around the desk, stopping beside me. One more thing. You'll notice that people treat me with deference. They won't meet my eyes unless I initiate it. They won't speak unless spoken to. You don't need to adopt those habits when we're alone, but in public, I expect the same respect. Understood? I nodded, rising to my feet. Yes, Alessio. His name felt foreign on my tongue, intimate in a way that made me uncomfortable. He noticed my hesitation and smiled, that predatory smile I'd seen in the alley. You'll get used to it, he said, echoing Sophia's words from yesterday. Come. I followed him to a large conference room where about a dozen people already sat, all in expensive suits, all looking tense. The room fell silent as we entered. Everyone stood. I noticed that, just as Alessio had said, no one made eye contact with him. Their gazes dropped to the table or fixed somewhere over his shoulder. Alessio moved to the head of the table, while I took the chair to his right, opening the tablet I'd grabbed from my office on the way. For the next 2 hours, I watched and listened as he conducted a meeting about property acquisitions in the West Loop. On the surface, it was like any corporate meeting: budget discussions, timeline reviews, marketing strategies. But underneath ran a current of fear that was almost palpable. When Alessio asked questions, people answered immediately, often with voices that trembled slightly. When he expressed displeasure, even mildly, faces paled. This wasn't respect, it was terror. As the meeting concluded and people filed out, a man in his 50s lingered. He was well dressed, but with a slight shabbiness around the edges. Cuffs a bit frayed, shoes a bit scuffed. Unlike the others, he approached Alessio directly. "Mr. Russo," he said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of desperation. "A moment of your time, please." Alessio regarded him coldly. "Mr. Donovan, I believe I made myself clear last week." "Sir, please. The extension. Just 30 more days. My wife's medical bills are not my concern," Alessio interrupted. "The payment is due tomorrow, as agreed." "But the interest, it's impossible." Alessio's expression didn't change, but something in the air did. A sudden drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the climate control. "You borrowed money from me, Mr. Donovan. You agreed to my terms. Your personal circumstances are irrelevant." The man's face crumpled. "Sir, please." Alessio turned to me, dismissing the man entirely. "Eleanor, note that Mr. Donovan's property on Dearborn is to be seized tomorrow if payment is not received in full by noon." I nodded, typing the note while avoiding the desperate man's eyes. "That will be all, Mr. Donovan," Alessio said without looking at him again. The man stood there for a moment longer, defeated, then turned and left without another word. Once he was gone, I looked up from my tablet. "His wife is sick?" "Cancer," Alessio said, gathering his papers. "Terminal, I believe. And you're going to take his property anyway?" He looked at me with mild surprise. "Business is business, Eleanor. He knew the terms when he borrowed the money. But if his wife is dying, then he should be with her instead of wasting time begging for extensions he won't receive." Alessio's tone was final. "The world runs on rules and consequences. Mercy is a luxury for those who can afford it." "And you can't afford it?" I asked before I could stop myself. Instead of anger, his expression showed something like curiosity. "Interesting. Most people wouldn't dare question me, especially not on their second day." He studied me for a moment. "To answer your question, mercy has its place, but not in business. Show weakness once, and everyone expects it. The empire I've built requires consistency and firmness." "Cruelty, you mean," I said softly. His eyes hardened. "Be careful, Eleanor. Your position gives you certain liberties in private, but they are not unlimited." He checked his watch. "We have a lunch meeting in 30 minutes, with the Kavanaughs." The abrupt change of subject was clearly intended to end the discussion. I followed him out of the conference room, my mind still on Mr. Donovan and his dying wife. What kind of man could remain unmoved by such a plea? The same kind who had men dragging bloody bundles through alleys at night, I supposed. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Alessio moved through his schedule with efficiency and authority, never raising his voice but commanding absolute obedience with just a look or a word. I took notes, fetched coffee, and learned the names of key players in his organization. By noon, my head was swimming with information, and I was beginning to understand the scope of the Russo Group's operations, at least the legal ones. Lunch was at an exclusive restaurant on the riverfront, where we were immediately shown to a private room. A middle-aged couple waited for us. The Kavanaughs, I presumed. The man was tall and distinguished with silver hair, the woman blonde and expensively preserved, her face tight from too many procedures. "Alessio!" the man boomed, rising to greet us. Unlike Alessio's other associates, he appeared genuinely pleased to see him, clasping his hand warmly. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Eleanor Wright, my new personal assistant," Alessio introduced me. "Eleanor, this is Judge William Kavanaugh and his wife Margaret." A judge. I tried to keep my expression neutral as I shook their hands, so Alessio had connections in the judicial system. Of course he did. "Charming," Margaret Kavanaugh said, her eyes evaluating me with cool assessment. You do have excellent taste, Alessio. The implication in her tone made me flush. Alessio merely smiled, pulling out my chair for me before taking his own seat. "How is your daughter, William?" Alessio asked as waiters appeared with wine and appetizers. "Still enjoying Harvard Law?" "Very much so," the judge replied. "Thanks in no small part to your scholarship foundation. We can never repay your generosity." "No need," Alessio said smoothly. "Supporting bright young minds is reward enough. Though I do have a small favor to ask regarding that matter we discussed last week." The judge's expression sobered immediately. "Of course. I've reviewed the case files. I believe I can help." They moved on to discussing what was clearly court business, speaking in vague terms about arrangements and favorable outcomes. I kept my eyes on my notepad, pretending not to hear what was clearly judicial corruption happening right in front of me. Margaret Kavanaugh watched me with amusement. "First week?" she asked during a lull in the men's conversation. "Second day," I replied, taking a sip of water. "Ah." She smiled knowingly. "It gets easier, you know, once you understand how things work in Alessio's world." "And how do things work?" I couldn't help asking. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Everyone has a price, dear. Everyone. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be." She glanced at her husband, then back to me. William was a crusader once, all about justice and ethics. Now our daughter attends Harvard on a full scholarship. We summer in the Hamptons, and retirement will be very comfortable indeed. Her perfectly manicured hand reached for her wine glass. "That's what Alessio does. He finds what you need most and offers it to you. The price is usually less than you'd expect, but more than you want to pay." I thought of my own situation. Financial security in exchange for complicity in whatever Alessio was involved in. "And if you refuse?" Margaret's smile didn't waver, but her eyes grew cold. "No one refuses Alessio Russo. Not for long, anyway." The lunch meeting concluded with handshakes and promises to meet again soon. As we left the restaurant, I noticed two men flanking us, security I hadn't seen arrive. They moved with practiced efficiency, scanning the surroundings as they escorted us to the waiting Bentley. "Is that necessary?" I asked as Marco opened the car door. "Always," Alessio replied, gesturing for me to enter first. In my position, precautions are essential. Once inside the car, he loosened his tie slightly, the first hint of informality I'd seen from him. "What did you think of the Kavanaughs?" I hesitated, unsure how honest I should be. "Don't censor yourself," he said, reading my expression. "I value your observations. They're corrupt," I said bluntly. "He's a judge accepting bribes, and she's proud of it." Alessio's lips curved into a smile. "Direct and accurate. Good." He looked out the window as Chicago passed by. William wasn't always corrupt. 10 years ago, he was untouchable. A crusader, as Margaret said. Then his daughter got into Harvard, but they couldn't afford it. Pride wouldn't let him take loans. "So you offered the scholarship." I recognized an opportunity. His tone was matter of fact. "Everyone has a vulnerability, Eleanor. For some, it's money. For others, family." For William Kavanaugh, it was his daughter's future. "And for you?" I asked. "What's your vulnerability?" His eyes snapped to mine, suddenly intense. "That's not a question you're ready to ask yet." The car fell silent as we continued back to the tower. I replayed the day's events in my mind. The ruthless dismissal of Mr. Donovan, the casual corruption with the judge, the way everyone around Alessio seemed to both fear and need him. The world he occupied was so far from anything I'd experienced, governed by different rules and darker principles. "You're quiet," he observed as we pulled up to the tower. "Just processing," I replied. He nodded. "There's a lot to take in. You're doing well so far." The unexpected compliment caught me off guard. "Thank you. We have one more meeting this afternoon. Then I'd like you to join me for dinner." It wasn't a request. "Dinner?" I echoed. "Yes. There are things we need to discuss privately." A flutter of anxiety rose in my chest, but I nodded. "Of course." The afternoon meeting was with Alessio's legal team, a group of sharp-suited men and women who spoke in technical terms about shell companies and offshore accounts. I took notes diligently, understanding enough to know I was witnessing sophisticated financial crimes. but not enough to grasp all the details. By 6 o'clock, my head was pounding with information overload. Alessio dismissed the legal team and turned to me. "You did well today." "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just watched and took notes." "Sometimes that's the most important job." He closed his laptop. "Go to your apartment and change, something formal. I'll send Marco for you at 8. "Where are we going?" I asked. "My residence." He stood, signaling the end of the conversation. 8 o'clock. I returned to my apartment, my mind racing. Alessio's residence, not his office, not a restaurant, but his home. The personal space of a man who kept everything about himself carefully controlled. I wasn't sure if I should be flattered or terrified by the invitation. In the walk-in closet, I found a section of evening wear I hadn't noticed that morning. After deliberating, I selected a simple black dress with a modest neckline but a back that dipped just low enough to be elegant without being provocative. I paired it with the lowest heels I could find and minimal jewelry. At precisely 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a message from Marco. I took the elevator down to find the Bentley waiting, its engine purring softly in the evening air. We drove north along Lake Shore Drive, eventually turning onto a private road that wound through an exclusive neighborhood of mansions set far back from the street. Marco pulled up to a gate, where security guards checked his ID before waving us through. Alessio's home was a modernist masterpiece of glass, steel, and stone, perched on a bluff overlooking Lake Michigan. Lights illuminated the perfectly landscaped grounds, and water features created a gentle ambient sound as Marco led me to the front door. It opened before we reached it, revealing Alessio himself. He'd changed from his business suit to black trousers and a charcoal cashmere sweater that somehow made him look both more relaxed and more dangerous. "Eleanor," he said, his eyes moving over me in a quick assessment. "You look lovely. Come in." I stepped into a soaring entryway with a view straight through to the lake beyond. The interior was minimalist but warm, with natural materials and strategic lighting creating an atmosphere of understated luxury. "Your home is beautiful," I said, meaning it. "Thank you." He led me through to a spacious living area, where a table had been set for two beside a wall of windows. "I designed it myself." "You're an architect too?" "No, but I know what I like." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Would you like wine?" "Yes, please. I needed something to calm my nerves." He poured red wine into crystal glasses, then took the seat across from me. "I imagine you have questions after today." "About 1,000, I admitted. "Ask." I took a sip of wine, rich and complex, probably worth more than what I used to make in a day. "What do you really want from me, Alessio? Why am I here?" He considered me for a long moment. Directness. "I appreciate that." He swirled the wine in his glass. "What I told you before is true. I need someone I can trust, someone unencumbered, someone who understands discretion. Because I witnessed something in that alley. That was the catalyst, yes, but it's more than that." He set his glass down. "I've been watching you, Eleanor, even before that night." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" "The Venetian, Giovanni Marconi's restaurant where you worked. It's one of several businesses he operates on my behalf." His eyes held mine. "I've seen you there, working double shifts, never complaining, always observant. The customers loved you because you remembered their preferences. The staff respected you because you worked harder than anyone. You were watching me?" The idea was disturbing. "Why?" "Initially, because Giovanni mentioned he had an employee who seemed different from the others. More intelligent, more observant, wasted on serving pasta." Alessio leaned forward slightly. "I make it a point to be aware of people with potential. So that night in the alley was coincidence," he finished for me. "A fortunate one, as it turns out. It accelerated a process I was already considering." My mind reeled. All those months of struggling, of working myself to exhaustion. And he had been watching, evaluating me like some kind of specimen. "What was happening that night?" I asked. "What did I see?" Alessio was silent for a moment, weighing how much to tell me. "A betrayal was being addressed," he said finally. "One of my employees was selling information to a rival. The consequences were severe. You had him killed, I whispered. I protected what's mine. His voice remained calm, matter of fact. In my world, betrayal cannot be tolerated. Mercy is seen as weakness, and weakness invites attack. A server appeared silently, bringing our first course. Something delicate involving scallops. I hadn't even noticed Alessio's signal for service. The food looked exquisite, but my appetite had vanished. You're afraid now, Alessio observed once we were alone again. Shouldn't I be? I countered. No. His answer was immediate. Not as long as you're loyal to me. He picked up his fork. Try the scallops. My chef trained in Paris. I took a small bite, the food turning to ash in my mouth despite its obvious quality. What exactly does loyalty to you entail? For now, learning, observing, keeping my confidences. He ate with the precise movements of someone who appreciates fine dining. Eventually, I'll trust you with more responsibility, handling sensitive communications, managing certain aspects of my business that require a delicate touch. Illegal aspects, I clarified. Some, yes. He seemed untroubled by my directness. Does that bother you? Shouldn't it? Perhaps. He refilled my wine glass. But I think we both know you're not as innocent as you pretend to be. What does that mean? It means I know everything about you, Eleanor, including the things you try to hide. His eyes bored into mine. I know about the money. My blood turned to ice. What money? The $10,000 you took from your last employer in Phoenix before moving to Chicago. The money that paid for your mother's experimental treatments her insurance wouldn't cover. I set my glass down with a shaking hand. No one knew about that. No one. How did you... As I said, I had you investigated thoroughly. He continued eating, seemingly unconcerned by my distress. Don't worry. Your secret is safe with me. I don't judge you for it. Quite the opposite. It shows resourcefulness, determination, a willingness to do what's necessary for someone you love. It's not the same as what you do, I said, my voice barely audible. Isn't it? You stole because you needed something more than you feared the consequences. The scale is different, but the principle is the same. He regarded me with something like sympathy. We're not so different, you and I. We are nothing alike, I insisted. But even to my own ears, the protest sounded weak. We both lost our mothers to cancer. We both understand what it means to do whatever is necessary to protect what matters to us. Alessio's voice softened slightly. The difference is that I have built an empire that allows me to act without fear of consequences. You haven't. Yet. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Course after exquisite course appeared and disappeared, accompanied by wine pairings I barely tasted. Alessio shifted the conversation to safer topics: art, literature, music. He was surprisingly well-versed in all three, and despite myself, I found him engaging and knowledgeable. In another context, with another man, it might have been an enjoyable evening. After dessert, a delicate confection of chocolate and berries, Alessio led me to a terrace overlooking the lake. The night air was cool but not cold, the stars obscured by Chicago's light pollution, but the moon bright enough to cast rippling reflections on the water below. Beautiful, isn't it? He asked, standing close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. Yes, I admitted. I come out here to think sometimes, to remind myself what I'm building, what I'm protecting. He turned to face me. Do you know why I really brought you here tonight, Eleanor? My pulse quickened. Why? Because I wanted you to see that there are benefits to the path you found yourself on. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face, the touch so light it was barely perceptible. The life I can offer you is one most people only dream of: security, luxury, power. At what cost? I whispered. Loyalty, discretion, occasionally moral compromise. His hand lingered near my face, but nothing you haven't already shown yourself capable of. I stepped back, away from his touch. I stole once, out of desperation, to save my mother. It's not the same as... I gestured vaguely at everything around us. All this. No, it's not, he agreed. This is better, because with me, you'll never need to be desperate again. The promise in his words was seductive. Never again to lie awake wondering how to pay rent. Never again to choose between medicine and food. never again to feel the grinding anxiety of poverty. "What if I can't do it?" I asked. "What if I can't be what you want me to be?" "You already are what I want you to be," Alessio said, his voice dropping lower. "You just don't know it yet." He stepped closer again, and this time I didn't back away. His hand came up to cup my cheek, and despite everything I knew about him, the danger, the criminality, the casual cruelty, I found myself leaning into his touch. "I should go," I whispered. "Not yet." His thumb traced my lower lip. "There's something between us, Eleanor. You feel it too." I did. A pull like gravity, drawing me toward him despite every rational thought screaming warnings in my mind. "This is a bad idea. Most of the best things in life begin as bad ideas." His smile was different now, warmer, more genuine. "I won't force anything. That's not who I am, but I won't pretend I don't want you. That would be a lie. And I promise to be honest with you. I need time," I said, finding my voice. "All of this. It's too much. Too fast." He nodded, stepping back. "Time you shall have. Marco will take you home whenever you're ready." I exhaled, relieved at the reprieve, but aware it was only temporary. "Thank you for dinner. It was educational." That earned me a genuine laugh. A sound I hadn't heard from him before. Educational. Not the word most women use to describe an evening with me, but I'll take it. Despite everything, I found myself smiling too. "I'm not most women." "No," he agreed, his expression turning serious again. "You're not. That's precisely why you're here." As Marco drove me back to the tower later that night, I watched the city lights blur past the window and considered my situation. In just 2 days, my life had transformed completely. I'd gone from anonymous waitress to the inner circle of one of Chicago's most powerful men, a man who dealt in both luxury and violence, who could offer protection or destruction with equal ease. I thought of what Margaret Kavanaugh had said. Everyone has a price. I'd already proven mine when I stole for my mother. Was this so different? Working for Alessio, accepting his world, perhaps even accepting him? The Bentley pulled up to the tower, and Marco opened my door. "Ms. Wright," he said, the first words he'd spoken to me directly all evening. "Thank you, Marco," I replied. He nodded, his expression softening fractionally. "He likes you, you know, more than the others." And before I could ask what he meant, he was back in the driver's seat, the Bentley gliding away into the night. I took the elevator up to my apartment, kicked off my heels, and walked to the window. From this height, Chicago spread out before me like a galaxy of lights, beautiful, distant, full of possibilities. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, watching my breath create a small circle of fog. 6 months ago, my mother had died in a hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. 3 days ago, I'd been trudging home in the rain, my future as gray as the clouds above. Tonight, I stood in a luxury apartment, wearing a dress that cost more than my old car, with the taste of fine wine still on my lips, and the ghost of Alessio Russo's touch on my skin. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if I could survive in Alessio's world, with its beauty and its brutality, but I did know one thing with absolute certainty. I was never going back to my old life. For better or worse, my path was now bound to his, and somewhere deep inside me, in a place I wasn't ready to acknowledge, I didn't want it any other way.